Welcome to the video legal podcast, on legal questions and answers in layman's language. And tonight's topic is bed sores and also nursing home liability. Well, hi everyone, I'm John Deary, and we are delighted that you've joined us for a very interesting discussion with regard to bed sores and nursing home liability. From the law firm of Dalli and Marino, which is located in Nassau County, I am delighted to welcome a friend and also remarkably active in many different areas, my friend John Dalli. John, welcome.
Great to see you, John.
So great to see you. Interesting word, bed sores. We've mentioned this to a number of people, and they're like, "Oh boy, bed sores." They've either had some experience, have a cousin, or whatever it is. So let's talk about the bed sores, type of bed sores, and I think people will be very interested in this litigation.
So certainly it's an issue for anyone who is a resident of a nursing home or in a long-term care facility. And there are certain types of residents who are more at risk than others. And before we even talk about what a bed sore is and what causes it, we need to talk about two other things, and that's the person's mobility, their ability to move, and also their nutritional status, whether they're taking in enough protein such that if they do develop a wound on their body, do they have the ability to heal? So a bed sore is basically a wound that occurs on what's known as a bony prominence. And a bony prominence can be our sacrum, the small of our back, or the heel, or the elbow, and even oftentimes on the ears or on the head. And it's caused by unrelieved pressure on those bony prominences. As the pressure increases on that area of the body, the blood flow, the circulation to those areas of the body decreases. And when the blood flow decreases, nutrients cannot get to that part of the body and the skin begins to break down. That is what typically will cause what is known as a bed sore or called a bed sore, or decubitus ulcer is another term that's used.
To try to get some sense, how much time does somebody have to have pressure to allow a bed sore to build up and be litigation?
So it depends obviously on the individual and their issues, their comorbidities. Somebody, for example, who is diabetic is going to be at a much higher risk of developing bed sores than someone who isn't. Someone who relies on, for example, nursing home staff to move them, whether it's in bed, even if it's getting them from a bed to a chair, if they need assistance in moving and can't shift their position in bed and are staying in the same position, that person's going to be at a much higher risk. So it's really dependent upon who that individual is and their ability to move, and also whether or not their nutritional status is such that they're taking in enough protein, so things like their albumin level is in the range where if they do develop the beginnings of a wound, they can heal.
Do you have any sense of the experience, male and female, as it relates to bed sores?
I haven't really seen any studies or anything that speaks about a higher risk whether you're a male or a female. Most of the studies that have been done and the research that's been done really focuses on mobility and nutrition. Certainly, somebody who is elderly, somebody who's over the age of 80 or 85 is going to be at a higher risk if they're not moving around. That risk may not be so great for an elderly person if they are able to move. They can get up on their own versus somebody who is younger, 60 or 65. If they're immobile and not moving, their risk is going to be higher as well.
What recommendations, as the expert that you are in this field, what recommendations would you make to a family who has an elderly? That could be 50 plus, 60 plus, 70, whatever. What recommendations might you have in terms of them checking for a bed sore?
So when we talk about recommendations we make to a family, we're talking about obviously more than just bed sores, right? We're talking about making sure that whatever facility the person is in, the staff there knows that they have people who care and are going to be watching. If you have a resident who, for example, has some level of dementia, doesn't or can't communicate fully, verbally, you want to make sure that that person is being turned and positioned if they can't move on their own, and to check weekly. Actually, you should check daily their back, their heels, to make sure there isn't the visible signs of skin breakdown, because prevention is really the key. Once the bed sore starts, it's much harder to stop the progression, because unfortunately in many of the nursing homes, and this is particularly true since COVID, they are understaffed and they don't have the people who are turning and positioning the residents. So you want to make sure you're looking at your loved one's skin as often as you can.
You have a hospital, you have a nursing home, and you have other kind of medical facilities. You've mentioned nursing home a number of times. Does your experience of bed sores tend to be more in one area than the other?
Well, we see a lot of bed sores develop in hospitals as well. Again, when you're talking about a hospital versus a nursing home, for example, in a nursing home, you're dealing for the most part either with a long-term resident or with a rehabilitation patient who's expected to be cared for there, be given some rehab, and then be discharged home. Often in hospitals, you have people who have more chronic illnesses, more serious illnesses. And oftentimes in a hospital, the staff there are going to be more concerned about dealing with their chronic issues. And even though the skin is the largest organ on the body, we see often that it's neglected in terms of positioning or repositioning patients who are in bed. In the nursing home, in the long-term setting, that's where we see the most bed sores. People who are living there long-term, they're not getting up, for example, for physical therapy or occupational therapy on a regular basis. And because of the staffing issues in these nursing homes, we see a lot more bed sores with those type of people, simply because they're not being moved.
What recommendations might you have in terms of, again, a family, if I can come back to that, and they have an older person that's there, the uncle or whatever. My question is, do you urge them to be looking for, because when you talk about a bed sore, it's in an uncomfortable position for someone to have to turn around and so forth. How do you get them sensitized to actually looking for the possibilities?
So one recommendation we make all the time, and this goes across the board with families who have loved ones in a nursing home, is once they're admitted to the facility, you want to have a conversation with the people who are responsible to not only comply with the regulations and provide care, but the people, the boots on the ground people who are actually going to be providing that care. We recommend that you speak to the administrator at the facility. We recommend that you speak to the director of nursing and a supervisor to find out exactly what is in that resident's care plan to ensure that skin breakdown does not occur. You also want to ask about staffing. On the overnight shift, most nursing homes, obviously, it's a 24-hour operation. Between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., which is typically known as the overnight shift, you want to ask, do they have enough staff to turn and position the resident, even while they're sleeping or while they're groggy? Because if they're sitting in bed or laying on their sacrum for 8 hours, skin breakdown is much more likely to occur. So you want to talk to the people at the nursing home who are going to be providing the care and who are responsible for developing the care plan.
Is it been your experience that the key people in a nursing home, for example, the administrator and etc., are they willing generally to speak to family members of the 75-year-old friend, individual?
So we have a saying that we use with a lot of our clients who have loved ones in a nursing home, and that's the squeaky wheel is going to get the grease. Most people are not going to ask to speak to the administrator or the director of nursing. If they don't want to speak to you, well, what does that say about that facility? It doesn't take much time for a phone call or for a Zoom call, and certainly you can request that. If they refuse to speak to you, you want to hear a good reason why, and perhaps there's an assistant or supervisor that you can speak to. The key is you want to speak to someone, because you want the facility to know that there are family or other persons who are going to be watching and looking out.
Our office has sent to you what we thought of and told us, look, this looks like a bed sore. And we've sent many, and you've accepted them and litigated them. We have also sent you what appeared to us as inexperienced in the field, but what we thought was a reasonably active bed sore, and you came back at negative. So I'm interested in what is it that you're looking for that makes the determination, yes, we go forward or not.
Okay. So, moving on to cases, questions about litigation, a little bit different than talking about what we'd advise a family to try to prevent it from happening, right? Okay. So, under the New York State Public Health Law, basically, the nursing home is required to provide all of the reasonable and necessary care that each resident needs for their particular medical conditions. It's not a one-size-fits-all type of situation. In New York, the regulations actually go a little bit further than they do under the federal statute. And in New York, the regulations require that a bed sore should not occur unless the facility can prove that the bed sore was what's deemed or known as unavoidable. And that has a legal definition in the law. Because of the nature of litigation and practice in New York State, which you've been involved in for many, many years, the process of bringing a case takes so long that stage 1 and stage 2 bed sores really are not actionable. The damages are not, unfortunately, significant enough to justify the long, parade through litigation. They really need to be a serious stage 3 or stage 4. And for the most part, stage 3 bed sores are not going to qualify. It's really the stage 4 bed sores where you have a photograph that show a significant skin breakdown. Certainly if you have complications like infection, osteomyelitis, sepsis, that's going to throw the situation into a case where we're going to litigate it.
So that sounds to me like it's only the most serious bed sores that actually get into litigation. Let's talk about litigation. Where do you bring a bed sore case?
So depending on a couple of different scenarios. So we like to bring the bed sore cases. If we can bring them in the first department, we do. You can't bring every case in the Bronx or in Manhattan. So certainly one of the venue questions is, where is the executor of the estate? Once there's an executor or an administrator appointed, wherever that person resides, you could bring it there. You could also bring it, obviously, in the county where the nursing home is located. There are some folks who have brought cases in federal court. I don't recommend bringing a bed sore case in federal court. That's a whole nother discussion. But the discovery rules in federal court, I don't think, favor a litigant on the plaintiff's side. So we bring them in state court, and usually it's going to be venue where the fiduciary lives, the administrator or the executor, or where the nursing home is. And also, sometimes you'll have additional defendants, a physician, a nurse practitioner in some cases. And again, using the venue rules that we have, we'll venue the case where we think is the most advantageous to the plaintiff.
If someone mentions a borough, any one of the 5 we have, is there a pattern of nursing homes? Nursing home X, there are a lot of bed sore problems. Nursing home Y, not too many. So I'm just wondering, is there a coalescing of bed sore problems in some nursing homes and not others?
Most definitely. So if we take a look at, for example, if we look at Nassau County, I just did a video about Cold Spring Hills, which is a nursing home that's infamous for a myriad of reasons. The Attorney General brought a very serious lawsuit against them for misuse of funds, which has become a big issue in the nursing home world. So we do see clusters of nursing homes that tend to have the worst results. And again, that speaks about the ownership of those nursing homes and speaks about how the revenue that's coming in through Medicaid, through Medicare, and private insurance, how that's being used for staffing and for providing the care that the residents need. One of the big issues in nursing home litigation today is analyzing, through use of really what are public reports, how the money that the nursing home is taking in is being used. Is it being recycled back into the operating budget? Are they hiring enough staff? Or is money going to places that is not benefiting the residents? And again, that's something we can certainly talk about, because that's become more prevalent over the past 5 or 6 years, certainly since the last time you and I got together and discussed this.
When you talk about a stage 4, and there are 4 stages, you're talking about, as we said before, the most serious cases. Without getting specific into a particular case here and there, what on average would someone with a stage 4 bedsore be looking at in terms of litigation and value?
So again, a lot of it depends on the individual. In other words, the level of pain and suffering that you can prove. Just to go back to the public health law, again, these cases, if we're looking just at a bedsore case against a nursing home only, we are not really talking about a medical malpractice claim. We're talking about a claim under the statute, a statutory violation, which has defined damages in the statute. And in our statute in New York, we have a very unique set of circumstances, because we can recover for a stage 4 bedsore where there's provable violations of a regulation that caused that injury. We can recover not only for the pain and suffering of that individual, we can also recover separately for the violation of the regulation, as long as we can causally relate it to the bedsores. And that's 2 lines on the verdict sheet now. If you can link the person's death, if they're unfortunate enough to pass away close in time to this bedsore developing and being treated, and there's proof that their death was somehow linked to the bedsore, that's a third element of damages that you can recover for. And that's not a wrongful death claim. That is death as an injury under the New York State public health law. And the fourth element of damages, which is very difficult to recover for in New York and is the subject of a lot of motion practice, are punitive damages. Because the regulations, Public Health Law 2801D, allows for punitive damages, but the case law that's developed over the past several years has made it hard to prove that. But there are up to 4 separate elements of damages that you can recover.
Since we're talking about average clients, just use that word and give a little definition as to punitive.
So punitive damages in a bedsore case is defined statutorily. It's not common law punitive damages. And as you know, in New York, to obtain punitive damages in, for example, a medical malpractice case, you have to prove such a high level of intent, it's almost akin to criminal intent in New York, right? If we sort of take a look at the case law and how to summarize it. Under the New York State public health law, in a nursing home setting, if you can show that the failure to provide the care that was required was reckless or willful, you should be able to go to the jury on punitive damages. However, the one caveat to that is that as case law has developed mostly at the trial court level, where defendant nursing homes are making motions to dismiss the punitive damages claim, most of the trial courts are applying the common law punitive damage case law. So they kind of miss it. And I think that has to do with the fact that they feel that these claims really are medical malpractice claims when in fact they aren't. So it's hard to get. And really, at the end of the day, you're looking at the violations of the public health law. You're looking at the pain and suffering, and perhaps death if it's causally related.
We've spent a lot of focus, of course, on bedsores, but there's the other word, which is nursing home liability. And I'm kind of interested in hearing what are the categories of cases that you deal with on the nursing home generally, aside from bed sores?
Sure. So obviously, bed sores are a big part of the type of injury that we're going to litigate for violation of a nursing home regulation. The others are, of course, falls and fractures. That would be probably the second most common. And in fact, today, at least over the past 3 or 4 years, I would say that falls and fractures have either surpassed bed sores or is equal to it.
Okay.
And again, that goes to the low staffing at these facilities. So, for example, somebody who's needs assistance to go to the bathroom, and they're a person who needs 2 persons to assist them versus 1. The nursing home doesn't have the staff to do it. They only have 1 person. The person gets up, they fall, they fracture their hip, they fracture their femur, they fracture their arm. Those are actionable cases. And pretty much any fall and fracture in a nursing home for a person who is not mobile, meaning they can't get up and move around on their own, is probably going to be a case. You also have medication errors, which have been increasing, okay? The lack of staff, unfortunately, when residents come from a hospital into the nursing home, the medications that they come over with aren't accurately recorded. The dosages aren't accurately recorded. They're discontinued without a full investigation into the need for the medications. So we see a lot of that, particularly with the psychotropic drugs. There's also sexual abuse. There's abuse by aides on residents. There's resident-on-resident abuse or resident-on-resident assault. I've handled a number of those cases, and it happens again because the nursing home isn't looking out and advocating for these residents.
What are some of the common defenses that nursing homes use in resisting the kind of claims you just outlined?
So what's ironic, and I'm doing these cases now, litigating these cases for 20 years, the biggest defense the nursing home, particularly in a bedsore case, likes to put up is the fact that the nursing home resident is old and sick and has comorbidities, whether it be diabetes, whether it be dementia, and that their illnesses somehow lessen the liability of the nursing home, and that the nursing home did, quote, the best they could, and we shouldn't be held responsible. And I find, as a trial lawyer who has picked, many juries and tried many of these cases, that is very off-putting to jurors, because an elderly person who needs help and needs care is in the facility for that very reason. Mm-hmm. And to argue that their illnesses and comorbidities somehow should punish them when they haven't been provided that care is something that doesn't go over very well. But interestingly, defendants still use that defense. They also will now hire doctors who are willing to come in and say that for example, in a bedsore case, that the bedsore was unavoidable because the person was so sick that they either weren't eating or their lab values show that there's no way they could have healed even if a minor sore started. So in those types of cases, we dig down really deep into the labs to disprove what those defense doctors are saying. But for the most part, the defense is that they're old and sick and we did the best we could, but that just doesn't fly, and that's not the law.
Talk about the duty of care. How does that relate to, generally speaking, allegations against a nursing home in addition to the bedsores?
Yeah, so the duty of care in a nursing home is the same as it would be, generally. But in a nursing home setting, of course, we have that's statutes and those regulations. So the duty of care in a nursing home in New York State really equates to that each person is an individual. You can't look at a person and put together a generalized care plan. It has to be specific to that individual. So if that duty is breached and an injury occurs, then you have the makings of a liability claim. To give you an example, if somebody comes into the facility, into the nursing home, and they have difficulty swallowing, okay, they need to be provided with a swallowing test. They need to have speech, evaluate them. If that's not done and their nutrition and they have difficulty eating and they start losing weight and have other problems, well, again, that's the beginnings of a liability. So it's really an analysis of the care plan. Did the care plan that was put in place, did that address all of the needs of that resident? And that's where you have to have a really good expert, geriatrician and nurse to help you evaluate the records when you review them to see if you have the makings of a claim, with respect to the duty of care.
Let's talk about claims against nursing homes and the issue that's very important called statute of limitations.
Yeah. So under the New York State public health law, which is really codified negligence, you can bring it's a 3-year statute of limitations. Unlike in a medical malpractice claim where we have a 2.5-year statute of limitations. But again, you have to be really careful if you're going to litigate these cases because there are times when you have to bring a medical malpractice claim for failures that occur in the nursing home. Let me give you a brief example. I just finished a case, we settled it during jury selection, that involved the placement of a PEG tube where a person had gotten a PEG tube because they weren't eating and they needed the PEG tube for nutrition and medication. That PEG tube displaced or migrated while the resident was in the nursing home. So the attending physician in the nursing home was responsible to monitor that person, and when that person started showing signs of that migration of the PEG tube, needed to do certain things that he did not do. So we had to bring a separate medical malpractice claim against him within the setting of the nursing home. So you have to be careful and you have to analyze your claims carefully because there can be crossover.
What is the role of an expert witness in both from the nursing home perspective and from the plaintiff perspective?
That's an excellent question because you want to have both, whether it's a fall case or a bedsore case, because you want to analyze, certainly from a nursing perspective, was the care plan that was put into place, A, was it appropriate, and B, was it implemented properly? So a nurse is very key because the nurse is going to outline for you, certainly at trial and certainly in trial prep and preparing you for depositions, what should have been done from a nursing perspective. And a nurse can testify about care in a facility that does not reach the level that the regulations require. However, what a nurse cannot do at trial is link those violations to the ultimate injury, whether it's the bedsore or the fall. You need a physician to do that. So the nurse sort of sets the table from their review of the records. These are the violations we see. And then the doctor will testify about how those violations were causally linked to the injuries that occurred.
It is very clear, just listening to you, your remarkable expertise in terms of the nursing home litigation generally, bedsores in particular. How active is this kind of litigation field, and what has been the steady or the growth of this particular litigation?
So a couple of things. Certainly, as our population ages, we have a much higher percentage of persons living longer. So there are more persons who need care. One thing that we've seen over the past several years is that there's been a push by the federal government based on their reimbursement rates to have more people, instead of going to nursing homes, be taken care of at home with either home health aides or with what's known as community Medicaid. So there's when the private equity groups got into the nursing home business, which they've been in for a very long time, but have increased their stake over the years, we've seen the quality of the care go down. So unfortunately, even though we like to think that each case we take and litigate is successfully is a way to hold the nursing home responsible such that they would do better, to be honest with you, I really don't see that. And I see the profit motive of these nursing homes really being their focus as opposed to, resident-centered care.
How would you evaluate the nursing home group of facilities that that industry, so to speak, how would you evaluate them on a scale of looking at, I'm not talking about winning a case here and there. I'm just talking about how do you evaluate the nursing home quality performance?
Well, generally, there are some facilities that do a good job. Without obviously naming names, but there are more that don't. So, in general, like I said earlier, I think the motives for a lot of these nursing home owners, particularly people who are backed by private equity, is a return on investment, like any other business. But they're not selling widgets or manufacturing cars. They're taking care of elderly residents with complicated medical histories who need care. And if they're not devoted to that type of practice, it's really in the form of a public trust, John, because we're entrusting our loved ones who cannot advocate for themselves. So you have a nursing home resident with dementia who can't speak as well as you or I can speak and can't communicate what's bothering them or where they have pain. And that continues to go on. And I unfortunately don't see any improvement in that area.
It's a bit troubling hearing your response, and I have no doubt that that's reflective of the situation, because it didn't sound like the majority of nursing homes are doing a reasonably good job. There are a few over here that generally don't. It sounded, as a matter of fact, kind of the opposite. There are some that do good service, but by and large, I kind of got a sense that a majority, or whatever it is, we're not talking 50 or 51%, but a majority seem to be less efficient than you're comfortable with.
Yeah, and obviously, we get phone calls from clients and certainly from other lawyers who refer us these cases. So we're always seeing the bad results. I don't get a phone call if there's a good result, you don't need me. You're not going to call me in that situation. Overall, I can tell you that there are nursing homes that we never see in our cases. So I'm presuming that they're doing a pretty good job because I haven't had a case against them. And then there are the nursing homes I see repeatedly that I have, several cases against, and over the course of years continue to get cases against. So that's sort of how I draw my conclusions.
It's distressing because the importance and significance of nursing homes and the desire and ability and requirement for people to be directed to nursing homes, it seems to me, is increasing significantly. And so when you talk about questioning the quality of the overall service, it's very concerning.
It is concerning, and fortunately, there are resources out there for families who need help with, if they have a loved one who's going to be going into a nursing home. To give you another example, if you fall at home, you're a relatively healthy person, maybe you're in your 80s and you're doing okay, and unfortunately you fall, you break your hip, you have to go to the hospital and have surgery. You're going to have to go to get rehabilitation after the hospital, and that's going to be in a nursing home. They refer to it as a skilled nursing facility, but that's what it's going to be. And unfortunately, I'm seeing in a lot of these cases, people who were doing okay, doing fairly well, cooking for themselves, dressing themselves, being able to do all of their activities of daily living with no help or minimal help. And then after a stint in the hospital and the nursing home, because they don't get the care and they don't get the rehab that they need, end up going downhill. And that's really one of the most distressing parts for me, is seeing somebody who really should have had a good outcome not have one, really due to the fact that the nursing home is not putting the resources back into the facility that they should.
Since, as we've said, there are so many people and the volume of needed people for nursing homes is escalating, to have a person with the kind of experience, the longevity of experience, and the focused attention on the nursing home liability, nursing home issues generally, and the clients that are in there, we're very lucky that we have a John Dalli, and I don't say that lightly.
Thank you, John.
To be impressed, as I have been, by your explanation of the liability involved here. And I can tell you, I thank you very, very much for taking the time to do this.
My pleasure, John. Always great to see you.
Thank you likewise, John.